everyone, Sabrina here from Scrappy Tales Crafts, and today I'm going to be showing you my 5-card 1-kit video using the Hero Art September 2020 kit. I just showed you the stamp set. You get a 6x8 and then you get a small 3x4 stamp set that includes some sentiments. You get a couple coordinating dies, a bunch of different glitter papers, a couple inks to use the stamp layering stamp set with, and then you get some gems to embellish your cards. So we're going to start with card 1. This video is super long, so I did speed it up quite a bit. I hope you guys don't mind, but I didn't want to do a part 2 for only 6 cards because I do have one bonus card, because while I was working with this kit, I realized that a movie could work with it. So I decided to include my last card as my day 3 of my Halloween card series. So I will tell you guys that movie at the end of the video, but these first couple cards are fall themed, and so I'm taking the layering stamps from the stamp set, and I inked up the first layer with the green ink that came in the kit. The second layer is the Cup of Joe brown ink in the kit, and then I will ink up the first pumpkin layer with the yellow that came in the kit, and then my final layer will be the orange that came in the kit. And I don't remember the names off the top of my head. If this kit is still available, I will link it. If not, I will try to link the individual inks here, because I do believe a couple of these, or maybe all of them, you can purchase separately. So that is the completed pumpkin layer. The stamp set's really cool. Usually their layering sets come with 2 or 3 layers, but this one actually had 4. And then I'm stamping out the wheat or the hay in the background. And I started with the yellow ink from the kit, and then my second layer will be the orange. If you want the orange to pop a little bit more than it is right now, you can dry the yellow first, but I didn't mind it too much. Those colors, I will say, were pretty similar though, so I did have to ink up the orange a couple times. I am now stamping out the scarecrow from the stamp set with the Cup of Joe ink, and then I'll also stamp out the birds. If you look closely, you can see that the scarecrow, the bottom third of him where it overlaps the hay, it did not stamp quite as well, and I believe that's because the yellow and orange ink are pigment and then the rest of the inks are dye. The purple might be pigment as well. I'm not sure why they changed up the 2 inks. I think maybe they added the pigment inks for ink blending, because I personally think that pigment inks blend a little bit easier, but they don't react well together for the most part. So I am going to re-stamp that scarecrow in black. However, you can just go over it with a brown marker if you want, a brown scarecrow. I thought it was kind of interesting that maybe if they dried in between, they would stamp on top of each other, but I'm not sure. That was just something I caught on with my cards. But you can see that pigment ink that I ink blended on the sky covered my scarecrow and my bird. So like I said, I'll re-stamp the scarecrow, and then I didn't trust myself with the birds, so I'm just going to fill them in with a black marker. I did ink blend that sky entirely with the inks that came in the kit. I try really hard to limit my extra supplies. I will say I did pull in a couple items, but whenever I work with my 5-card or 10-card video kits, I try to limit my supplies as much as I can. So I think the ink blending turned out really nice. They blended fairly well together. So I am now going to assemble my cards. So this stuff that I'm cutting up right now and adding to my card base is just straw. You can get this stuff at the dollar store. I think I got mine at Michael's, and I like to add little straw bows to my DIY crafts and stuff. So I thought that this might look good on my card. I do kind of like it, but I think it's very distracting. So I'm going to end up removing all that straw on the card base, and I'm just going to go with this cute little straw bow. And then here I'm going to figure out my sentiments, and I decided to use 2, and these came in the 3x4 sentiment stamp set. So here's where I decide I just want to use a bow. I like the simplicity of it, and I did want the focus to be on that pretty scene. So I'm going to stamp my first sentiment, give thanks, right above the wheat layer. I don't know what that is. I think it's wheat. And then I want to add my second sentiment as a tag on my bow. So I wanted the tag to match the purple in the sky. I felt like it would be nice to tie the purple from the top of the card to the bottom. So I ink blended the same purple ink onto some white cardstock, and then I stamped the sentiment Happy Harvest. And I do like how that looks, but when I added it to the white card base, it just felt like the border was too much white. So I did add a yellow matte behind this ink blended one, and I like that much better. And the purple ink was kind of splotchy, so I added a little bit of orange ink to the edges, and I like how that matches the sunset. Again, because they're pigment inks, I did have to go over the sentiment again with my black pen. So if you want to avoid that, stamp after your ink blending. I'm going to wrap around some straw to this panel, and then over to the left I will glue down my bow with my tag attached to it. So I really like how this turned out. Here I'm just adding a little dot of glue to the top of my tag to attach my bow, and then I'll pull in my card base once again, and I really like how that looks. So I'm going to go ahead and pop up the ink blended panel with some foam tape. I love using this wide foam tape by Uline whenever I'm popping up some panels, because this foam tape is really cheap. I think it's like $11 a roll, and the rolls are huge. So here I'm just adding it back onto my card base. I will attach my little bow with the tag, and I'm going to add some foam tape to the bottom of the tag where it overlaps the card base, because I do want everything to be level and I don't want that tag to get squished in the mail. And you don't have to use straw for the bow. You could use twine or jute. I think that would be really pretty. But I thought the straw was kind of cool because of the scarecrow. And if you're watching for my holiday card series, I mean, not holiday, Halloween, oh my gosh. I guess the hint that I'll give you is that it's mostly centered around that scarecrow. And so I'm going to finish this card off with the gems that came in the kit, and I love these. They coordinate perfectly with the inks. I think they're really great as a finishing embellishment for the fall cards. So I will actually use these on all the fall cards that I created today. I just think they add a nice subtle shine. So here is a close-up of card 1. We are now going to move on to card 2, and I'm going to create a Halloween card this time. So I'm going to take the first layer of the pumpkin patch and ink it up with my VersaFine Onyx Black ink. And I absolutely love this pumpkin layering stamp. You can go in a lot of different directions with it. You could obviously do fall, and the ink colors that came in the kit were such a pretty combination. But I also thought of a couple Halloween cards. So I'm going to remove this first layer from my Misty so that I can dry it with my heat tool. And that's because I want to add some silver embossing powder for my second layer. And I don't want that embossing powder to stick where I don't want it to. So I made sure that was nice and dry. And then I will ink up the second layer of the pumpkin patch with my Versamark ink. And then I will pour my silver embossing powder on top. And I love how spooky this ended up looking. And I didn't use the fourth layer of the pumpkin layering set. I only used the first 3. So you don't necessarily have to use all 4 stamps. Obviously, when you use all 4, you get, more color variety and more detail. But because I wanted these pumpkins to be black, there was no point in adding that 4th layer. So I'm going to move on to the wheat, and I'm going to stamp the first layer with VersaFine Onyx Black ink again, and then I will heat set it. Oh, just kidding. I guess I added 2 layers of wheat this time. So I'll ink up another layer on top, and then I'll go ahead and stamp out my second layer after I heat set and make sure that VersaFine is completely dry. And now I am inking up the second layer with my Versamark ink, and then I will pour silver embossing powder over these 2 layers. So like I said, I'm not sure if this kit is sold out or not. I wouldn't be surprised if it is. I think this kit might be my favorite one this year, but I always say that, and I'm always blown away with their Christmas kits. But I really enjoyed working with this kit. I'll admit, usually the stamp layering sets are challenging for me, and I kind of prefer the coloring ones, but for some reason I had a lot of ideas, and these 6 cards came together really nice. I enjoyed the whole process. So now I just punched out a circle from one of my circle punches, and I'm going to add a little bit of double-sided tape behind it and attach it to the top left of my sky. And then I'm going to ink blend my Black Soot Distress Oxide ink with my Picket Fence Studios brush. And I'm focusing the ink mostly around the edges of the card panel, and I'm letting it fade off where it meets the wheat. And I love that that kind of created a foggy sky. I removed my circle mask, and it reveals a paper white moon. I think that turned out really cool. And I'm going to stamp some birds over the moon. I think the birds, they're just such a nice little finishing touch to these scene cards. I know Hero likes to put birds into their scenes because they do look realistic, and they're essentially just like a little check mark in the sky, but I love birds. So yeah, I added some stars to the background using my Gonzai Kiritaki pearlescent watercolor, and I just splattered those on with a paintbrush. And now I'm going to stamp out my scarecrow. I learned from last time to ink up the scarecrow and the birds last, although it doesn't matter because the background's black, but you know. And I just love VersaFine. I argue that it is the most crisp black ink you can buy, and you can buy it at Michael's with a 40% off coupon. So it's my favorite black ink of all time. So I'm going to work on my sentiment now. I wasn't sure if I wanted a silver embossed sentiment or a white heat embossed sentiment, so I just did both. And I thought I wanted the silver, but I ended up liking the white. So sometimes if you're unsure and you're deciding between two things, just do them both, because I ended up using the silver one on another card. So it wasn't like it was a complete waste of time. So here I'm deciding on the white sentiment, and then I'll go ahead and pop up my pumpkin patch with some foam tape, and I'll also pop up my sentiment. And this sentiment came in the 3x4 stamp set. I like that they included that because the sentiments in the 6x8 are all fall themed. And it's always nice to have sentiments, because personally, I don't know about you guys, but sentiment stamps are the stamps that I don't want to buy, but you kind of have to have them. So throwing it into a kit I think is really smart. So I attached my black mat onto my 110-pound white Neenah card base, and that's pretty much going to complete the card after I embellish it with a couple Trinity Stamp silver rhinestones. I love that these kind of look like stars. I'm just going to attach them down with my art glitter glue. And I do, for some reason, arrange my sequins or embellishments in a diagonal. So there is the completed card. I'm not sure why, but every time I do a stamp layering video, I always have at least one black and white card. But this turned out really cool. I love the monochromatic look. So moving on to card 3, I'm taking a Lawn Fawn die from my stash, and I'm going to cut it from the copper glitter paper from the kit. And I keep every piece. There was a large piece that came out of that die. I will keep it. And I'm going to cut it again from the brown glitter cardstock. So I'm going to use the copper one as a frame, and then I'll cut the brown glitter tree from this panel. And then you're left with a pretty brown frame, which you can definitely use. I'm going to attach the brown tree on top of the copper one, and you just get a cool two-tone glitter panel. And I'm sure you guys are betting that I'm going to add acetate behind this, because I definitely am. So I'm first going to die cut a white stitch rectangle, and I'm going to do my stamping on this. So I'm pulling back my MISTI. The MISTI is very helpful when it comes to stamp layering sets, although you're going to see, I think for my 5th card, I'm going to just use a block. You don't necessarily need a MISTI or a stamp platform. It's just helpful if you have to double stamp, which you're going to see. This green ink I got in the kit wasn't super juicy, so I had to ink it up a couple times. So my first layer is this green color. I think it's called Moss. I'm going to heat set it because I think gold heat emboss the second layer. I really love how the silver embossing turned out on the last card, and I felt like gold would be really pretty on a fall card. So I'm going to use my Hero Arts gold embossing powder for this layer. And then I will go ahead and heat set it, and I just love watching gold powder heat set. Alright, so we're on to the third layer, and I'm going to go with the orange ink from the kit. And then I'm not sure if I add the fourth layer or not. I guess I do. I think I used an ink from my stash. This is Potter's Clay. It's kind of an orange-brown color. You can also probably use the Cup of Joe ink. That might be too dark, I'm not sure, but you can give that a try, I guess. So for the wheat layer, I'm actually going to make it grass. I don't know if it turned out looking like grass, but that was the intention there. So I'm going to again heat set it because I want my second layer to be gold. And here I'm bringing back my frame to see what it looks like, and I think that's really pretty. I love the gold embossing powder mixed with the... And my eager self went ahead and stamped out that scarecrow, even though I know it's going to get covered by the pigment inks again. But that's okay, I fix it with a brown marker. So I'm just going to stamp out that second layer of the grass, and then I'll heat set it, and then I can work on my sky. I went with the sunset again just because I used all warm colors, and I felt with the glitter cardstock it would look really pretty with the sunset. So I die cut a circle from some scrap paper, and I'm going to use that as a mask like I did with the moon, but this time it's going to be a sun. So for my first layer of ink, I am adding the yellow from the kit, and then for the second, I'm going to add the orange. And then my last color is going to be that Potter's Clay, which I used as the fourth layer of my pumpkins. You can definitely use the purple. I mean, purple, yellow, and orange are a classic sunset. Definitely my go-to, but I wanted it to be a little bit different for my first card. So I'm going over each color twice, making sure I get an even blend, and then I will remove that mask. Now with the moon, I liked the stark white, but the sun I felt was a little too bright, so I went over that area with my yellow brush again. Just whatever was left on it, I added. And then here I'm fixing that scarecrow with a brown Copic marker. It's very easy to fill it in because it is a solid image. So now it's time to add the acetate, so I'm adding some art glitter glue behind my glitter panel, and then I will glue it on top of the acetate. I am going to take a few seconds to make sure that is completely dry before trimming around it because acetate is slick and you can definitely slide the glue, so you have to be a little bit careful with that. Believe me, I've done that before. All right. And then I'm going to pop this panel up with some Scotch 3M foam tape. Whenever I'm working with really skinny areas, I go for my Scotch, and then large areas, I go for my U-line. Just because the U-line is really sticky, it's going to destroy your scissors. Even your Tim Holtz non-stick scissors, that's how sticky it is. So I do like to have the Scotch on hand for skinny frames like this. And then I will just attach it right on top. And I'm going to remove this because I wanted more birds in front of the sun. I loved how the birds looked in front of the moon. So I will peel it off. If I used the U-line, there's no way that would have peeled off, but the Scotch isn't as sticky and I was able to move it off without tearing anything. So I'm going to work on the sentiment again. I wasn't sure if I wanted a gold heat emboss sentiment on brown cardstock or on craft, so I did it on both, and I liked the brown a lot because there was brown on the scarecrow and the tree, And then now the sentiment, so there is a visual triangle going on. And then here's where I decide I definitely want those birds. I stamp them out with black ink. And doesn't that just make the difference? I don't know if it's just me, but I think I use the birds on every card. Alright, so I added some ATG tape behind the ink blended panel and attached it to my card base. And then I'll just finish it off with the rhinestones that came in the kit. I'm scattering them again in a diagonal, and then I will make sure that they're nice and adhered with my art glitter glue. And then that will complete my third card. I really like how this one turned out, and you can use any tree in your stash. You don't have to use this lawn fawn die. But here is a close-up. For card 4, I'm taking some stitch rectangle dies. I'm going to cut a smaller one from some white cardstock, and then this larger die from the orange glitter cardstock from the kit. I'm also going to cut the letters FALL from the orange glitter cardstock from an Echo Park letter die. I've used this die set in a lot of videos lately. And I love that you can customize your sentiment with the letters. So here is the layout that I'm going for. I want it all to be sentiments, and then the background I'm going to create with the pumpkin patch layering stamp. So we're going to go ahead and start the background with the first layer of the pumpkin patch with the moss ink. And then I'll line it up right above the one that I just stamped. Ink it up again and stamp it down, and then I'll do it one more time right at the top, and it lines up very nicely. You can see my first layer is quite splotchy, but I knew the second layer was going to cover up the majority of this, so I didn't worry too much about it. So for my second layer, I'm going to use the Cup of Joe ink from the kit. And when you first stamp it down, it looks very dark, but it does dry back and it mixes with the green underneath, so it kind of turns more of a dark green than brown. It's really pretty. Once I finished this panel, it kind of reminded me of vintage wallpaper, although I don't know anyone who would put this on their walls. I think the colors reminded me of it. So for the third layer on the pumpkins, I will ink those up with the orange ink from the kit. Here I'm lining up my panel because it shifted in my MISTI. So like I said, having the MISTI is really nice if you have to double stamp, but the images are pretty easy to realign if you do use a block. And you're going to see for my next card, I will use a block instead because I will be creating a slimline. And I wanted to make sure that the pumpkin patch extended across the length of the card. And I just felt like it would be easier using a block. So that is the third layer complete. I'm going to heat set it because for my final layer I wanted to add gold powder. I really love how the last card turned out, but I kind of felt that the colors underneath were completely covered by the gold powder. So I felt like the fourth layer would be better because it's not going to emboss the entire thing. It's just going to emboss the detail layer on the pumpkins. So I really love how this one turned out. So I'm inking up all 3 rows with my Versamark ink. You do have a couple minutes to add your embossing powder with Versamark. So you can go ahead and ink up the whole background and then add your powder, and it will stay sticky. So here I'm pouring my Hero Arts gold powder, and this came in a kit from last year. It is by far my favorite gold powder, and I'm almost out of it, so I do have to buy more. But some of the items you get in the Hero Arts kit last like super long. In fact, for my last card, I'm going to use contents from the September kit from last year. And I do like having the ability to mix and match previous kits with new kits to get some more variety of cards. So I'm now going to work on the sentiment, and these all came from the 3x4 set. I'm going to gold heat emboss them on some brown cardstock. I don't remember which sentiments I went with, but we will soon find out once this is heat set. I think it says, hey pumpkin, hey there pumpkin, fall greetings, thankful for you. So for my fall letters, I felt like they were blending in too much with the background. So in order to make them pop, I'm going to layer 3 brown letters behind the glitter ones. And this is heavyweight brown cardstock, so that's going to pop them up substantially. And I think this made the world of difference, because I did not want to give up those orange glitter letters. I think they were really pretty, and I like that they coordinated with the frame. And I love the clean look of layering letters on top of each other. So here you might see the difference, maybe not, but it does pop them up quite a bit. So I'm going to add foam tape to the gold heat emboss sentiments. And those are actually the same height as the fall letters. So everything is pretty evenly popped up. And I think that they stand out pretty well, but I could see people thinking that it's still a little bit busy. So if you wanted to tone it down, you could definitely add vellum on top. I think that would be really pretty. But I think you can notice in real life that the sentiments do pop out a little bit more than it seems on camera. So I'm going to finish off this card with some more of the Hero Arts gems. And then I will layer this panel onto my orange glitter frame. So I added it onto the white card base, and I felt like it was too stark. I wanted all warm colors, so I'm going to cover the card base with some craft cardstock. Then I will attach my orange glitter frame, and I did cut a rectangle from the center because I want to keep as much of that glitter as possible. And I'm going to glue the panel on top, so you'll never know that I cut a piece from the center. And now I'm attaching my stamped panel with some ATG tape, and then that is going to complete the 4th card. I really like this one, it's different. So we're going to move on to the 5th card, and this is my Slimline card, and I think out of all of them, this one's my favorite. Like I said earlier, I'm switching over to a block just because I felt like it was easier to line up, and you are able to stamp twice because these background stamps are pretty easy to line back up. So just like I did with the first card, I'm going to use the inks from the kit. The first layer was the green, second was the Cup of Joe, third is the yellow, and then the 4th layer will be the orange ink from the kit. I am standing up and I'm giving my stamps some CPR in order to make sure that that ink transfers to the paper. The panel was cut from some 110-pound white Nina cardstock. I cut a Trinity stamp stitch slimline rectangle from that. I am double layering the orange because, like I said, the yellow and orange are very similar. And then we're going to create the wheat with the yellow layer, and then the second, I think I actually used the potter's clay, but you can use the orange and layer it twice instead. But I wanted the wheat to stand out a bit more. And then I'm going to create the sky. So I'm taking a Simon Says stamp cloud stencil and my blue blender brush. I'm not even re-inking it. I'm just using whatever ink is on the brush to add some blue color. And I love how that turned out. And then I can just kind of fill in areas and embellish the card. I'm going to start by stamping out the sentiment, and this is the only sentiment I used from the actual 6x8 stamp set. This one says, "Thankful and grateful for you." I stamped a couple birds, and then I will stamp out my scarecrow with the Cup of Joe ink. And then you can see that I stamped out some hay barrels and that single bird from the stamp set, but I didn't really like the hay barrels, but I did like the bird. So I'm just going to stamp the bird with VersaFine ink onto a couple of the pumpkins. And then I love how the first card turned out with that straw bow, so I'm going to add a nice long one to the bottom of this panel. So I'm attaching the straw with my Scotch tape to the back, and it's a little bit fiddly because I'm using 2 layers of straw. But that Scotch tape will hold it down, and then I'll use whatever was left over that I cut off to create the bow here. And I will attach it to the side of the card. I'm also going to adhere the actual strip of straw just because I wanted to make sure that it wouldn't like tear off because this stuff is pretty flimsy. So I attached the bow. In the center of the bow I added a gem, and then I will add ATG tape behind this panel and attach it to my Slimline card base, and then that is going to complete this card. I actually did not embellish this one because I thought the colors turned out really pretty and it didn't need anything else. I will say there is a line where I connected the pumpkin patch and the hay, but I don't think it's very noticeable. I showed it to my dad and he didn't notice it, so I figured it's fine. So for my final card, I stamped the first layer of the pumpkin patch with my Imperial Purple VersaFine ink. The second layer was stamped with VersaFine ink, and then the last layer was stamped with the grape ink that came in the kit. Included in the stamp set are some little jack-o'-lantern faces, so I stamped a couple of those with the VersaFine ink. And then I will ink up the wheat with my Imperial VersaFine Purple ink. And then the second layer will be the VersaFine Onyx Black. And I kind of wish I left the pumpkins white for this. I know the video went kind of fast, but I did show before stamping that grape. I really liked how the white looked. So if I were to do this again, I probably would have left those pumpkins white and did not even add the third and fourth layer. I don't think I added the fourth layer to these pumpkins, but I wish I left them white. So I would have only used the first 2 layers. I die cut a bird and a scarecrow using the coordinating dies. I stamped those with VersaFine. This oval I cut from the wood grain pattern paper that came in last year's kit, and I wanted it to be more purple, so I'm using the grape ink and a blender brush to add some purple onto this oval. And then I'm going to layer the pumpkin patch and the hay. And then I'm going to die cut this Happy Halloween die from some silver cardstock. And this die came in last year's kit as well. Both of the kits coordinate really nicely together. And then I also went ahead and die cut the pumpkin patch and the wheat from that same oval so that everything would line up together nicely. I'm going to punch out all those little pieces inside the letters. And I was running out of time. You can see that it's getting dark in the video, but if I had extra time, I would have layered that Happy Halloween with 2 layers of black cardstock just so that it popped out a bit more, but I think it looks okay. I had a couple pumpkins left over from when I die cut the oval, so I decided to cut those out and add them to the left and right of my scarecrow. Now this card is meant for my Halloween card series, so it's not a super obvious movie, I will say that. And it might honestly be a stretch to be considered this movie, but you know what? It has some resemblance, okay? I would focus on the scarecrow and the pumpkins. However, I watched this movie such a long time ago, and I don't even remember if pumpkins were like a main thing or not. I don't think they were, but I think you guys might guess it because I was thinking about it while creating these cards. So I am going to be curious if you guys have guessed this movie yet or not. But I did ink blend some purple clouds using that same Simon Says stamp stencil and the grape purple ink from the kit to create that background. And I felt like it was too bright, And this is a spooky Halloween card after all, so I'm going to add black soot around the edges. And for some reason it got super dark at this point. I think I am going to turn on the light in a couple seconds here because it's pretty bad right now. But I try to utilize as much natural light as I can because I do not like artificial light, at least the light in my craft room. But this is bad, I admit. Sorry, guys. So I like how that background turned out. The clouds kind of faded off when I added the black soot, but I think that was okay. I'm going to go ahead and glue everything down now, so I'll attach the Happy Halloween with my art glitter glue. And then I added the crow to the E on Halloween, one of the E's. And then I'm going to glue down the hay flat, and then I'll pop up the pumpkin patch. And then I will attach my little scarecrow and then the 2 pumpkins with my art glitter glue. And then, of course, I've been doing this to a lot of my cards lately, adding pearlescent white watercolor to create stars in the background. It just adds a lot of pretty shine, and it also brightens up the card a bit because this one is quite dark. And then I will finish this card off with the same Silver Rhinestones by Trinity Stamps. I love the pearlescent watercolor splatters mixed with these rhinestones because they kind of look like dimensional stars. It's just really pretty. So I turned on the light, and as you can see, the card is much brighter, but it looks more like a red purple. In the close-ups, you're going to see like it's a true grape color, so it's more purpley blue. So I'm going to mat this panel onto some black cardstock cut to cover my card base, and I'm using a gray card base because I ran out of my white ones, and this was at my disposal. I think it worked out pretty well. Here's a close-up. Here's what I mean. It's more of a true purple, and it's really pretty. So now I'm going to show you the other 5 cards that I created. Let me know which card was your favorite. I hope I was able to give you guys some inspiration if you got this kit. And I will say that these cards only took an afternoon to make. I think I started around 1 and ended about 7. So I think that's pretty good given I made 6 cards and there was no coloring, but they all turned out really pretty. I absolutely loved working with this kit. If you haven't guessed the movie, it is Sleepy Hollow. There's also a really old Disney movie called Ichabod and Toad, I think. I don't know if that's the name or not, but it's basically the Disney version of Sleepy Hollow. Let me know if you know that movie and if it's the right title, because I'm not sure, but I thought of both movies while creating these cards. I know it might be a bit of a stretch, but please let me know if you did guess it right, because I'll be so surprised. Anyway, thanks again for watching. If you haven't yet already, please subscribe to my channel. Otherwise, I will see you next time. Bye!